I trust you have so far found the public forum to be productive and engaging. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this session on environmental sustainability, uncovering key lessons from the least developing countries and priority actions moving forward, which is the 109th session of the forum. My name is Ambassador Professor Muhammadu Ka, and I'm the Ambassador and Permanent Representative of the Gambia here in Switzerland and at the United Nations organizations, including the WTO. Climate change is one of the critical issues of our time. The climate crisis is particularly pressing for the least developing countries, which have made a minimal contribution, yet are bearing the brunt of its impact. Creating a greener and more sustainable future is a smart approach to ensure sustainable development for the least developing countries. The relationship between environmental sustainability and poverty reduction is becoming clearer. Good examples have continued to emerge on how environmental issues could be addressed concurrently with a focus on sustainable economic growth that responds to developmental objectives, particularly on reducing poverty. In the Gambia, for example, we have taken a holistic approach to integrating climate and trade policy and practices into our national planning. As such, our recently completed National Development Plan has a green recovery focus and addresses three important development challenges: COVID-19, climate change, and debt distress. This session aligns with the important objectives of climate mainstreaming into national policy frameworks and was set up in line with the public forum theme of how trade can contribute to a greener and more sustainable future, with a specific focus on least developing countries. The objective of this session are to enable strategic cross-learnings amongst the least developing countries and their unique experiences in responding to environmental concerns and simultaneously improving their economies through green trade. Also to outline priority actions in supporting least developing countries' efforts in green trade. And lastly, to address the critical question of how trade-related technical assistance plays a role in creating a greener and more sustainable future. Ladies and gentlemen, we are privileged to have a distinguished panel of speakers who will be graciously sharing their insights on a range of perspectives that we would like to gain from this session. I have Dr. Andrea Giacomelli, who works as Aid for Trade and Trade Policy Advisor at the Permanent Delegation of the Pacific Islands Forum to the United Nations, World Trade Organizations, and other international organizations in Geneva. In the role of Andrea promotes the establishment of regional initiatives in the priority areas of the Pacific Aid for Trade strategy and assists Forum Island countries individually and collectively to make better use of aid for trade opportunities. We also have Dr. Ratnaka Adhikari. He has been serving as our at the Executive Secretariat for the EIF at the WTO as our Executive Director since October 2013. Previously, he was Chief Executive Director of South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics and Environment, a Kathmandu-based regional think tank. Prior to that, he served as a senior advisor to the National Planning Commission, Government of Nepal, as Trade Program Specialist for the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, Asia Pacific Regional Center in Colombo, Sri Lanka, and as a credit manager of Nepal Indo-Swiss Bank, among others. He has extensively published in the areas of international trade, investment, finance, and technology. We also have Dr. Jun Yong Lee. Dr. Jun Yong Lee is currently working at the Trade and Environmental Division of the WTO. Prior to joining the WTO Secretariat in 2007, she worked at UNDP in Slovakia and at the Korea International Cooperation Agency, among others. Her most recent publication includes Culture and International Trade Law, From Conflict to Coordination, which analyzes the nexus between culture and trade. We also have Ms. Sita Giri. Ms. Sita Giri is the founder of Mountain Crafts, a Bhutan-based social enterprise with extensive experiences in environment, climate change, disaster risk reduction and response. She served the United Nations in Asia Pacific, Central Eastern Europe, and Africa for over 2 decades. Sita's vision for Mountain Crafts is to connect Bhutanese rural artisans with regional and international markets, preserving culture, promoting sustainable business, and encouraging nature-based products. She is committed to community resilience through cultural and ecosystem conservation. Sita's dedication to empowering local communities and preserving indigenous knowledge systems drives her impactful work in Bhutan's artisan industry. As you can see, we have quite a diverse and rich panelist. So, once again, welcome, and I will get straight to the first round of questions for our panelists. I kindly request our panelists to keep response to 4 minutes, which will ensure that we have sufficient time for the interactive part of this session. I will commence with Dr. Andrea Giacomelli. Dr. Giacomelli, the Pacific Island Forum has identified quality infrastructure as one of the priorities of the Pacific Aid for Trade Strategy 2020 to 2024 due to its significance in promoting and sustaining trade development. Could you please speak to the environmental consideration in the Pacific Aid for Trade strategy in light of the region's vulnerabilities?
Thank you.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador. Yes, as you rightly point out, the trade strategy in the Pacific region is led by the Pacific Aid for Trade Strategy 2020-2025, and which is a document that lists what are the priorities for regional cooperation in the area of aid for trade. And the priorities that were identified by our ministers are 4. One is connectivity, then we have e-commerce, then we have services, and then we have a priority which is called deepening markets, which includes 3 subcategories: quality infrastructure, trade facilitation, and trade policy and trade agreement. So as you can see, if we want to speak frankly, environment is not included anywhere in the Pacific Aid for Trade strategy, the current iteration. Nonetheless, we found in quality infrastructure, in this priority, an important linkage. And I must say, if you like, we thought about it at the beginning, but we discovered more and more the importance of quality infrastructure for the environment as we were implementing initiative in this area. Now, as some of you know, quality infrastructure encompasses policies, the laws, the institutions, as well as the service providers that support businesses to improve the quality of goods and services that they sell. And in this way, they ensure that these goods and services meet the requirement demanded by buyers, okay, both private and public buyers. Now, obviously, it's a demand-led priority. And so in an era which is marked by growing concern about the environment, its preservation, climate change, many of the standards and the specifications that are demanded by the public and the private sectors are related to environment sustainability. So that's why quality infrastructure becomes, if you like, the technical underpinning to achieve environmental sustainability goals, from fostering a green and circular economy to mitigating and adapting to climate change. Now, quality infrastructure organizations, such as the standard bodies, provide support to the entrepreneurs by helping them adopt the standards for producing sustainable goods, as well as engaging in the production processes that are environmentally friendly. This, in turn, drives innovation and enhances competitiveness in trade. There exist, Ambassador, a number of examples about the positive impact applied by quality infrastructure to environmental sustainability. For example, when it comes to production processes, there are standards like the ISO 14001-2015 and 50001-2018 that are very important for companies because they offer practical guidance to improve resource and energy efficiency. If you look instead at the standards for goods instead of production processes, important examples for the Pacific include fair trade, Rainforest Alliance certified for products like coffee and cocoa, Forest Stewardship Council, as well as, obviously, for a region like the Pacific, an important one is the Marine Stewardship Council standard for our fish, as well as, of course, various organic certification tailored to the different destination markets. So, Ambassador, these are, if you like, some of the environmental consideration behind the establishment of the Pacific Quality Infrastructure Initiative, which is a regional multi-stakeholders partnership coordinated by the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, which is aimed at strengthening demand-oriented quality infrastructure and improving at the same time our competitiveness in the area of trade. Now, I think I'll stop here for now, but before doing so, I would just like to express, obviously, my gratitude to Dr. Ratnakar, who is here with us, for his support to this initiative, which has, over the years, since 2020, benefited from substantial financial support from the EIF and the EIF team, as well as partner agencies including Australia, Germany, Japan, and the European Union. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that question. And I would also like to welcome, since EIF is the organizer of this session, welcome all the participants, including distinguished guests, including Ambassador of Bhutan, who just joined us. In terms of the what EIF has done, let me go back to a bit of a history, in the sense that in the phase 1 of the EIF, we didn't have explicit mention of the environmental consideration in our programming, but in phase 2, we started out by recognizing the fact that there are 3 cross-cutting issues. The first one is poverty, second one is environment, and the third one is gender. And that was the first time when environmental considerations were also included in the EIF log frame, number 1. And number 2, what we did is the analytical work, which actually provides the foundation for any kind of intervention in the LDCs. We actually wanted to include environmental consideration in the analytical work called Diagnostic Trade Integration Study. So back in 2016, after the launch of the second phase of the program, we revised the guidelines for the preparation of the Diagnostic Trade Integration Study, and environment, poverty, and gender dimensions were included there. So after that, we started receiving a lot of interest from countries also to take up environmental sort of activities. And as of 2022, I'm very pleased to report to all of you that over 80 actions relating to environment have been supported by the EIF. I mean, we are a trade capacity building program, but we also care a lot about environment, and that's why those activities have been supported. And they have now they are part of the log frame. We have a system of monitoring in place, and we actually we have made the milestones that was set out for us by the end of 2022 as well. But then there are specific, and this is the broad thing, but then there are specific areas where we are engaged in environmental sustainability aspects. So first one is the mainstreaming side. The Diagnostic Trade Integration Study, the findings of the study is a tool through which the environmental dimensions can be potentially mainstreamed in the National Development Plan, and then DTIS actually. Some of the findings of the DTIS have actually been mainstreamed, right? So in Zambia, based on the DTIS guideline that we provided, they recent DTIS in 2023, which is an update of the previous one, they now have a chapter on environment and climate change, and we hope that it will help the country to feed the findings of the chapter into their national development plan and to mainstream that. So that's one example. Second example is that in the run-up to COP26 that took place in Glasgow, we partnered together with the Overseas Development Institute, International Institute for Environment and Development, to bring together the climate constituency and trade constituency together in the run-up to not only COP26 but also WTO MC12, which was going to take place in November that very year, which was later postponed, to bring them together to discuss and find common approaches to dealing with trade and climate-related issues. And then we also organized during the global review of 2022 last year, together with the World Bank and German Ministry of International Development, BMZ, to sensitize the stakeholders on trade and climate change issues. And so the World Bank had just launched the report, and that was very much instrumental in helping us to get the message across. And the second category are the improved practices. For example, in Mali, what we've done is to support them on Gum Arabic project, and one of the things Gum Arabic project they do is to plant acacia tree, which can protect the desertification of the country, and they actually became a part of the greater initiative called Great Green Wall of Africa initiative, and this project had helped substantially to prevent desertation in Mali. Then the second example is the ecotourism project that we have been supporting in Sierra Leone as well as Comoros, and both of them have delivered significant results. And the third example is the one in Haiti, where we are not only supporting sustainable fishing, but also helping the communities in regeneration of coastal ecosystem. So these are a few examples that I just wanted to highlight. I'll stop here and then we'll be able to respond to the second part later. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Adhikari, for this overview, which underscores the importance of aid for trade programming in addressing environmental concerns. Thank you so much. My next question is to you, Dr. Lee. Could you please provide to us an overview of the state of play of the ongoing multilateral and plurilateral discussions at the WTO relating to environmental sustainability?
Thank you very much, Excellency. First of all, I would like to convey my deepest appreciation to you in chairing us, and also to Dr. Ratnakar and his team for involving us, Trade and Environment Division of the Secretariat, in this very important discussion. Let me try to zoom out a little bit. As your pertinent question put up, we have the terminology of multilateral and plurilateral here. The discussions on trade and environment has gone on over very, very many years. Maybe you may think that this is the recent years are the only time that we have discussed about trade and environment nexus, but actually really not. Our preamble, let's first look at the multilateral side. So our preamble of establishing this organization, Marrakesh Agreement so-called, has a very particular terminology acknowledging the very importance of sustainable development, even mentioning protecting of environment. Now, putting that aside, this organization, as you all know, it's a very rules-based organization. Everybody talks about this agreement and that agreement. In the case of trade and environment, we do not have yet an agreement called Agreement on Trade and Environment. So this particular situation, the context, puts us in a very interesting and actually exciting situation that a lot of topics that can be related to trade and environment, trade and climate change, trade and sustainability, you name it, we can all discuss here very much so at the multilateral level that we are here at the WTO. So from that context, we have a very interesting and very important institution platform, sub-institution of the WTO platform that is called Committee on Trade and Environment. I want to really acknowledge that your leadership, Excellency, in that committee and any other trade and environment related platform up front. This committee, guess what, when was established? It was established in the year of 1995. So we have a lot of discussion went on there, beautiful experience sharing amongst the entire WTO membership, that is 164 members. So I would characterize this committee as a platform that any member, including LDC, I emphasize, any member can bring up their concerns, their interest, their wish list, basically, to be discussed in a very transparent and structured manner with all of us. Now, I want to give you a very good news on this Committee on Trade and Environment. About 2 years ago, I remember that under the Italian presidency of the G20, that very G20 document, sometimes being regarded as a very difficult document to be agreed on the G20 members, it really acknowledged the importance of the role of CTE that plays, that platform plays for the discussion on trade and environment to go go ahead in the multilateral trading context. So that's something that I really want you to be aware, that WTO has been working on this discussion as an inception of this institution. Now that's multilateral side. And recently, what members are doing, including G90, that a lot of LDCs are in G20, they have put forward a text-based submission how this committee should work for the benefit of development, not in the isolation, only talking about trade and environment. Actually, all of you just now before me talked about the nexus, the cross-cutting issue nature between trade, poverty reduction, climate change, and all that. So this G90 submission is urging this committee look at this issue together with other committees in the WTO, like Committee on Trade and Development, or even Working Party Group on Technology Transfer. So there are a lot of positive, I would say, very positive movements are ongoing right now. So we are at a very exciting time. That's at the plurilateral level. Now, that's at the multilateral level. Now, if we look at the plurilateral level, I could name 3 distinctive initiatives that are very actively ongoing. One is trade and environmental sustainability structure discussion that you, Excellency, are part of. And also another one is on dialogue on plastic pollution and environmentally sustainable plastic trade. I need to read up this one because it's such a long name. The last one that some members are very keen to discuss is on fossil fuel subsidies reform. Those are 3 initiatives. I must confess that on these initiatives, the participation of LDC is relatively not that active. Hence, I think Gambia's leadership is a very important, because Gambia is part of the 2, is very much exemplary, I would say. So your leadership, I really personally hope that it will have a spillover effect into other LDCs as well. Why am I saying that? Because, for example, if we talk about plastic pollution issue in relation to trade, this is a particular area that is specific. Sometimes we often feel like that we don't necessarily know how to be engaging in the broad ocean of the discussion on trade and environment. Let us to go into small steps, and then with the specificity that affects LDC, especially Ratnaka, you mentioned about ecotourism. When we go to a place, we don't want to see plastic waste there, right? So is there any linkage that we can discuss between ecotourism, trade, and then environment? Can we improve the tourism industry of LDCs? Even from this angle, there are lots of things. Now, finally, one thing I want to mention is we should not forget the MC12 success, although it's not complete as yet on fishery agreement. That's something that WTO has achieved, WTO members has achieved to limit subsidies that contribute to the unsustainable fishing, obviously. So that's the final element that I wanted to emphasize in the context of the WTO. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for the important overview of the efforts of the WTO on trade and environmental sustainability. And be assured that Gambia will continue to step up to our collective efforts in that regard. I will now move to Ms. Giri. Mountain Crafts, which you founded, is a platform for showcasing and marketing exotic Bhutanese products handicrafted by rural communities in Bhutan. As the private sector's voice on this panel, could you provide insights on Mountain Crafts' sustainable business model and make references to how it can be adaptable to LDCs. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ka, and also for chairing this presentation today. Also, I acknowledge the panelists here, the distinguished panelists, and the audience here. I know it's lunchtime, but you've made time to come here and be here, part of this discussion. Particularly acknowledge Ambassador from Bhutan, who is here, and the delegation here from Bhutan. And special thanks to EIF for inviting a small representation from a small business sector in Bhutan in this forum. This is really an inspiration for us. So thanks very much. I would like to start by saying that environment shapes livelihood and culture. I think we take it for granted, but environment shapes the livelihoods and culture. Okay. So preservation of environment, landscape, and ecosystem is crucial for the survival of local communities, culture, livelihoods, and economy, and that's where the trade comes and with the economy. Thank you. I have some slides and I wanted to share. Yes, thank you. Mountain Crafts, as introduced by Dr. Ka, was born out of passion for appreciating and preserving cultural practices that are environment-friendly, engaging local communities and learning from their wisdom, adopting environmental solutions in our business model. Our focus is not on the profit here. We look at low volume and high quality products that we create and also create items that showcase Bhutan's beautiful textiles, crafts, and culture and provide sustainable livelihoods to the rural artisans. So it's more about continuing the culture and tradition, providing livelihoods so that those indigenous crafts continue, because you need incentive to sustain these. And we have seen across the world that the cultures are eroding because communities don't see they don't see value or incentive into the practice that they're doing. So we really look at conserving those indigenous practices. We explore, we innovate using different natural-based products. You will see that, and you may also go to the stand. There is a booth where we have displayed some of the products. You can see mostly we deal with organic products grown in Bhutan, the nettle, Himalayan stinging nettle, plant fiber, organic cotton grown in Bhutan, and the sheep wool products that you will see. So these are the items that we deal with. But what we do is we try to use traditional fabrics and crafts into something different, like in modern ways. So I'll just share with you some of the. So this is the nettle fiber that's been used for weaving clothes. This has been a tradition in the past for hundreds of years, but now with access to modern clothes, communities are moving into more use of modern clothes. So the craft or the culture of weaving nettle and wearing nettle dress costumes is now being extinct, and we want to look at how do we revive that by providing incentive, providing market access to these communities. So this is called page. It's used by some of the communities in Bhutan. What we're doing with the nettle plant, so we design bags like this. So it's kind of embellished with the yak hair rope that you see, the one in the black. The white is the nettle fabric, and the black is the yak hair rope. So we try to use different combination, innovation, and creation to come up with items using traditional materials, but you have something different that's appealing and aesthetic. This is a laptop bag, also with nettle and yak hair rope. And we use, still communities in Bhutan use traditional practices in terms of spinning. It's all handmade, from spinning of the yarn to natural dye, use of natural dye, and also weaving. So these are all done by hand. In terms of Mountain Crafts business model, we source the materials directly from the artisans. We don't have weavers like many handicrafts have. We don't have weavers in our workshop, we basically work with the communities directly. We buy the resource materials from the communities, but we also ensure we spend time with them so we know that they're using the genuine products, they're using the natural dye, they're using the natural products. So we spend time with them. We know the community is a small place, so it's very easy to understand and know the people there. So we engage them directly and provide the livelihoods, but also making sure that because art and craft should continue in the places where it is originated. So we want to make sure people continue that trade. So we connect with the artisans directly and source our materials. Eco-friendly, the raw materials used in the production comes from sustainable sources using sustainable harvesting practices. So people traditionally, they know when is the time to harvest nettle. Like normally it's September, October, that's the fruiting season. So after the fruiting season is over, the fruits have fallen down, then they would harvest the crop, the stem of the nettle around November. And that's the time when the stem is mature. And then next year, also when they harvest from the base of the stem. So next year it regenerates again. So people already know this, and then we kind of work together with them. We also work with the Ministry of Forest, Department of Forest, to also conduct sometimes training on sustainable harvesting of the resources. Premium quality. We focus on the design and artisanship. You would have seen some of the pictures. And let me show you some more. So this is indigo. So we work with the artisans. This is indigo plant. We work with the artisans who actually grow the natural dye in their farm, in their backyard. So this is indigo plant, which they use turmeric for yellow. And then you have madder that's on the plantain, the creeper that you see on the plantain tree. This is madder for red coloring. These are some of the products made from silk, hand-woven completely. Sheep wool coat, made from the sheep wool from central Bhutan, natural dye. And these are our artisans with whom we work, who are weaving. So also, one of our principles is happily made. So we want to make sure we work with artisans, and they are paid well for the product that they make. And they are working in an environment. So as you see, people like normally women gather together and they work in groups. They weave in groups. They make the yarn in groups. They do the natural dyeing. So it's also happily made. And I'm very proud to say that Mountain Crafts is a recipient of the Brand Bhutan Award, considering the premium quality and sustainable production. The Brand Bhutan initiative is also part of the export development strategy initiated by the Department of Trade, Ministry of Economic Affairs. And this was launched in 2016, actually supported by the EIF. So grateful for the EIF support and collaborating with the government of Bhutan in coming up with this Brand Bhutan initiative that actually helps distill companies and artisans to showcase the best products in the country. Finally, environmental sustainability and product quality. So the core of our Brand Bhutan assessment criteria is environmental sustainability and product quality. So Mountain Crafts was able to qualify in this, so we were given the award for Brand Bhutan for 2 of our products. Thank you. I would close at that. Thank you very much, Dr. Ka.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Gary, for these insights and for the commendable and inspiring work you continue to do at Bhutan. Is quite inspiring, actually, seeing the work of the artisanals, and we thank EIF actually for recognizing this important work and supporting it. Now I move to the second round of questions. I come back to you again, Dr. Giacomelli. Could you please provide examples of how aid for trade has supported specific Pacific LDCs to help them in building resilience?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to bring, I think, 2 examples that are related to LDCs and supported by the EIF. So one, I'll keep going on with this story of the quality infrastructure, because I think it's a really nice example on how a lot of time development projects, they look at specific value chains, specific products. Then when support finishes, there is nothing left. Whereas with EIF, we are trying to establish this cross-sectoral structure to build capacity in the countries, in the region, so that they can support different range of products whenever the demand arises. And there can be interesting spillover effect. The EIF support to quality infrastructure was not supposed to go into, for example, building codes, but it ended up there. And this how this happened? Well, essentially the EIF supported the establishment. One of the lines of support was the establishment of a standard committee, regional committee for standards. And then once you establish the regional committee for standards, that's demand-led. So one of the demands that came from the region was to come out with the development of harmonized standards on building and constructions. And this is a job that is ongoing now in the Pacific region, and through the through the establishment of a working group on one of these priority standards, building and constructions. And the goals of the technical experts, which are in this very moment, working on the development of these standards, are ambitious and highly relevant to our fight against climate change. The goals of the committee, of the working group, are first, to reduce carbon footprint of the buildings, to promote buildings that are more environmentally friendly. Secondly is energy efficiency, to ensure that our buildings in the Pacific use energy wisely. Third is climate resilience, to make sure that our buildings are capable of course, withstanding the extreme weather events that are more and more frequent and worse in terms of intensity, as well as the sea level rise. And fourth, to reduce waste by minimizing the construction waste and encouraging the use of natural material that you can find in the islands, and sustainable building practices. Now, one of the tangible success so far has been the development of a regional energy standard for buildings based on a model from New Caledonia, one of our members. And this standard is already freely accessible to all Pacific members, is serving as a reference point, and is serving as a reference point for national building codes. Now, obviously, standards get developed, but to get access to that, you need to pay. Of course, we provide the regional public goods, so the Pacific standards for energy efficiency is free. It sets a high bar for energy performance and promotes sustainable construction practices throughout the Pacific. And this is, I think, is a valuable result and a good practice, showing how regional aid for trade can help countries achieve objectives that could not be achieved in isolation. Now, if time allows, then the last example I would like to bring, and since we are talking about LDC, it would be remiss of me not to mention the example of the Vanuatu Tourism Infrastructure Project, which is a major endeavor initiated and supported by the EIF, and which resulted in the redevelopment of the waterfront in that country. Now, besides targeting tourism development, the project included the restoration of the Vanuatu capital seawall, onto which the redesigned waterfront was built. Now, this is a practical example of how Aid for Trade can mainstream climate goals, because the restoration of the seawall not only served as the launching platform, if you like, for the new model of tourist development in Vanuatu, but also helped protecting one of the most vulnerable countries in the world from the impact of climate change, including more frequent and increasingly intense cyclones. It was an example of a virtuous partnership between environment and trade that shows how mainstreaming must work, if you like, in both senses, climate towards trade, but also trade towards climate, to make a difference for sustainable development. So I hope these two examples, Ambassador, can be useful to provide some Pacific perspective to this interesting discussion we are having today. Thanks.
Indeed, quite insightful, and I'm sure we are all taking notes on what we can do to replicate some of these successes. And now I turn to you, Dr. Adhikari. Could you please provide further insights on practical ways through which aid for trade could be utilized to promote environmental sustainability across LDCs?
Thank you very much, Ambassador. One of the things that we have realized in relation to aid for trade is that how aid for trade can be mobilized to leverage additional resources is the key to solve many problems, because it turns out that finance seems to be the major problem facing LDCs, and LDCs do not want to get a loan to reconstruct, such as the one in Vanuatu, to reconstruct the sea wall because it was damaged by climate change, to which they didn't contribute anything. So just to give you that perspective, then therefore it is important to mobilize public finance and private finance in order to achieve their environmental objectives in general and climate-related objectives in particular. So there are 5 ways through which this can be done, and this has been already well documented. The first one is that the single largest problem that we've noticed is that there's a lack of coordination between the Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and the Ministry of Environment, which is responsible for environmental-related finance or climate-related finance. So, these ministries tend to work in silos. So what we've done, we've followed a model of destroying these silos and then bringing these two constituencies together to work together collectively in order to develop a bankable project and then be able to identify the real challenges and develop project and submit to international organization for financing. And for now, we've actually worked under your leadership, Ambassador, and I would really like to thank you for initiating this project, in the Gambia itself. What we've done is basically to provide a tiny little support, institutional support, to create that coordination platform, number one, and also to help and sensitize all the stakeholders, including the private sector, on how aid for trade can be leveraged to mobilize climate finance. And as a result of which, and I'm pleased to report to everybody, and Ambassador, you know it very well already, that a bankable project has actually been developed, and then that is now, the draft is ready, which is eventually going to be submitted to the Green Climate Fund and other financing instrument or mechanism to attract climate finance. So that's one example. Second challenge is the general investment climate is very poor in most LDCs. So what can be done to improve the investment climate? Through the institutional support that we provide to countries, and our national implementation units are already working round the clock to improve the business climate in countries, and as a result of which their investment climate has already improved. But we want to go beyond that and want to provide capacity building support to investment promotion agencies to not only to attract investment but also to provide aftercare services and to retain investment. So for that, we are collaborating with all Association of Investment Promotion Agencies to provide capacity building support to all the LDCs, IPAs, the investment promotion agencies. And we've also partnered with UNCTAD to provide support to least developed countries to attract investment on sustainable development goal sector, SDG sector. When we talk about SDG sector, definitely environment and climate are those sectors of interest, and that includes clean energy, the various mitigation plan, as well as other adaptation measures, such as those relating to agriculture. The third way through which this can be done is to provide feasibility study support. Some of the projects are there. Clean energy project, for example, is there. But then, if the potential financier do not know as to whether the project is viable or not, why would they put money into that, right? So we have provided feasibility study support to understand the feasibility of various projects, including projects relating to environmental conservation and climate change. And then following that, what we can also do is to provide project preparation grant, and this is the kind of grant that we provided to Gambia, but in other countries also we have provided project preparation grant for them to develop the project, and that could be submitted elsewhere. for funding. Then the fourth one is, and this is slightly tricky in the sense that many donors or private sector partners or impact investors would not invest in a kind of idea, abstract idea, if there is no proof of concept. So what we can do potentially is to support them by providing a small grant to start off with a proof of concept, and once that proof of concept is developed and it's actually piloted in a few sectors, then that can be scaled up through additional financing. And final one is the seed funding that we provide, and we have been providing this seed funding. We call ourselves a catalytic mechanism. We provide little money with the expectation that the countries are able to mobilize additional resources. This one or the example is the right example that you provided. We provided actually for the seafront wall construction, 3.15 million was provided by the EIF, and they were able to mobilize additional 15.8 million from the government of New Zealand to complete that construction. And that's a good example. And now we are talking about not only mobilizing additional public money, such as from the grant from the government of New Zealand, but we are talking about using seed money to mobilize to this de-risk project, to mobilize various other financing through climate finance and various through for the other financing instrument as well as private sector, and that would be a clear example of blended finance, which we have not yet done, but this is something that we intend to do in the future. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adhikari, for those very practical perspectives on how environmental sustainability can be mainstream in aid for trade. And I think sustainable and blended financing that is impactful will be very useful in sustainability efforts in the LDCs. As you rightly pointed out, the case of the Vanuatu is quite an important example that other projects can be formulated accordingly, especially as EIF step up its efforts to get other phases of projects in our countries. I will now turn to Dr. Lee. Dr. Lee, the WTO recently accompanied the EIF on a very interesting mission to my country, the Gambia. Could you please provide some of the outcomes of that mission and suggestions on how the LDCs, such as my country, the Gambia, could be supported to articulate our environmental sustainable priorities at the WTO? Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Actually, this is my one-year anniversary coming back from Gambia last year. It's exactly this timing. With Annette and Peter, we made a very good collective joint missions to Banjul. I was really honored to see the beauty of your amazing country. I particularly love the chili sauce. I remember that this is a harvest season, so I'm actually thinking about Gambian food right now. Maybe it's a small story to kick off. When I arrived in Banjul Airport, apparently there was a heavy rainfall, which was very unusual at that time of the year. And as a consequence of that heavy rainfall, unfortunately, the support person who was driving me to the hotel, taxi driver, couldn't really find a road to get to a hotel from the airport because there were simply lots of water, really, really a lot of water on the road. The road was not recognizable. And then I saw on the road that was not necessarily that recognizable, there were many stands. I can imagine you will know what we're going to talk about. There were many stands that I was wondering what those stands are for. So I asked to the driver, what are those stands? But there are nobody. Stands are there, but there are nobody. So he explained to me, he really enlightened me extremely. The point of view, Ratnaka, you are mentioning, the cross-cutting issue of climate change, poverty reduction, gender, everything was there in that story that I was witnessing. So those are the stands, informal economy stands. The owners of those stands are women, mostly 100% women, selling used clothes from the Europe to be sold out on the market. Now, because of the road not being there, stands were not able to be used, and therefore the moms cannot earn any money for their kids and for their school. So when I just arrived in Gambia for the high-level meeting amongst very different ministries, trade, environment, agriculture, fisheries, I thought, wow, my mission will be really amazing for me at the personal level, because that really gave me the real conviction about my small portion, that policy issue supporting the discussion of WTO members' policy issues on trade and environment is actually real. It's not in vacuum. So in that high-level session, what did we achieve? I was really amazed. Obviously, probably for the past few days in this public forum, you may have heard a lot about things in silo, not coordinated, we should talk to each other, we should do more. But in the Gambia, we were really impressed. I'm sure Annette and Peter will really support my observation. Your ministries were completely coordinated in submitting nationally determined contributions under Paris Agreement, and also tried to look at awareness, the fact that trade and trade policies can be a tool for combating climate change. That awareness was completely there. We didn't need to raise that awareness. Probably thanks to, in a way, the situation you are in with climate change. Now, I heard, actually, in order to prepare this session today, I had a small chat with officer in Banjul, also to celebrate 1 year, and he told me that, as Latnaka you mentioned, they have managed to have this national adaptation plan set, and this proposal for Green Climate Fund is, thanks to EIF support, is on the process. I was very, very happy to hear, because at that workshop, the most critical, very challenging issue that all of us were saying was trade finance. Actually, that issue is not only for LDCs, right? Now, and they were mentioning about how difficult to go through a Green Climate Fund process, which takes over 3 years at some point. That was quite something. So the fact that, okay, of course, more step, EIF step, helping them to make this proposal for Green Climate Fund is a big deal. Congratulations to you, Ratnaka, and your team. And also, I hope this will really go through to have that proposal in place. Now, I will rephrase a little bit about, talk about a little bit about capacity. We talk about capacity often. It's not only for LDC's capacity. It's a capacity for all of us to know how to move this discussion now in the WTO. Whether we like it or not, how to mobilize your diplomatic action in trade field, it's actually in the WTO is a text-based. We need to put forward submissions to the other members to let them know what are my concerns. So for that, I really proactively urge you to make that happen. You are already doing it. All the LDCs are doing it through G90, ACP group. A lot of things are coming up. That's really good news. Please keep doing it and make that voice, written voice, to be heard in the Committee on Trade and Environment. That is the only committee in this House that is for 164 members. So I really urge you to do that. So then I also urge myself, the WTO Secretariat, sometimes we should forget about member-driven organization. In this case, for technical assistance and capacity building, we should also proactively support you, even though sometimes we may not clearly get your demands. So that's something I wanted to put forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for sharing a very insightful, practical, real outcome for your mission, and I think it's quite useful as a guidance for other member states within the LDCs and for missions that are coming to our countries to be very mindful of the unwritten realities of actors and agents of trade in our communities. And all you have to do is get out of the hotel rooms and meeting halls to go to communities and see the real actors and agents among our women folks and increasingly young people who are on micro enterprises and small and medium-sized enterprises, but micro enterprises embedded in communities that are supporting families' livelihoods and also providing very micro market access to livelihoods of goods and services that are produced by, again, women in the agriculture value chain and horticulture. That brings it to these micro hubs where families will go and get these items at very affordable rates to be able to feed their families and ensure that they have the nutrients that they need. So it's a very powerful example that I think strengthening the collaboration of WTO's EIF arm and strengthening EIF's efforts, because EIF is at that micro level and changing impactful lives in very sustainable ways. So thank you so much for that. And now I turn to Ms. Gire for my final question for this round. And I want to thank my participants for your kindness and patience to be with us when you're supposed to be at lunch. So I want to appreciate you as well. So quickly, how could Aid for Trade better support enterprises in least developing countries such as yours to adapt to eco-friendly business practices while simultaneously attaining access to regional and international markets, and as I mentioned earlier, micro markets that are embedded in our communities that touches people's lives directly? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Carr, and I really appreciate this question because giving voice to small business to talk about and influence Aid for Trade and giving voice to the small businesses. Sustainability, green business has cost to it. And buying the right products, that's good for the people and the planet is very important, not goods from the cheapest source of supply. And I would really urge here international organizations and institutions that support green trade should look into removing barriers of economic competitiveness. And this is more so important for a country like Bhutan, sandwiched between giant textile producers like India, China, Bangladesh, and look at Bhutan where we are, and how can international organizations support countries like small countries like Bhutan to remove this barrier of economic competitiveness. And I would really also want to highlight here, especially in the case of Bhutan, as we talk about green trade, we talk about environmental conservation, there's cost to it. The international community needs to recognize the effort made by the government of Bhutan and the people in preserving the natural heritage with the policy to maintain at least 60% forest cover for all times. And this comes with a cost to the people and the country. And how does international organizations and mechanisms support such initiative, environmental initiatives and the policies, and it's not just policy on paper, but it's also actual implementation that we have in Bhutan. How does international organizations and mechanisms, whether it's the United Nations, the Conference of Parties for Climate Change, and other WTO, EIF, how does it provide incentive for adopting green policy and practice? Because it looks nice on paper, it looks nice when we talk about it, but there are hundreds of people in the communities who are day-to-day facing wildlife conflict. They are suffering from the impact of the climate change for which they haven't contributed any. So how does the world support such countries and the communities? My own personal experience with the mountain crafts, the two major challenges that I've faced as a Bhutanese enterprise are high shipping cost and lack of e-commerce facility, which make it very difficult and challenging to export products out of Bhutan. If you just take the cost, like probably the cost of DHL shipping from Bhutan to, say, Europe or US is almost like 3 times if you are shipping from India or Nepal. How do we kind of get away with this barrier? What can the world, what can the international organization do to support? Another area I think EIF and WTO could support is access with international market for the products from the LDCs, especially landlocked countries like Bhutan. Even like for us, for me, just to give an example, for me to come to this conference, like we don't have Embassy of Switzerland in Bhutan. So we had to apply from Embassy in Delhi. So there are challenges in every step. How do we overcome such challenges, and what can the world and the international community do to help us outcome such challenges, and especially for small business like the mountain crafts? Most artisans who are involved in textile business in Bhutan are also women, and provision of maybe small-scale processing units, relevant training. Actually, I've been also a beneficiary of the EIF training on communication, social media, and branding, and that's where I learned about value-based pricing versus the competitive pricing, and I think that's very, very relevant for a country like Bhutan and our products. So how can organizations, EIF, WTO, support LDCs, especially landlocked countries such as Bhutan, in overcoming such barriers? And I would like to close with that and really look forward to seeing closer interaction between the small enterprises with organizations such as WTO and facilities such as the EIF. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gary, for your further insights and suggestions, which I believe is well received and will be taken into consideration by the Aid for Trade community. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our panel segment, and once again I thank you immensely for the insights and perspectives, my panelists. It's been quite inspiring and very brilliant, I must say. Now I quickly get into a Q&A segment. I would like to now open the floor for any questions or comments that participants may have. And I see a hand already up. We have barely 10 minutes for questions, so if you can just get to the point for our panelists, we'll appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your very enlightening remarks to the whole panel. I'm Joachim Monkebaan from the World Economic Forum, and I will be very pointy in my question. I think actually Dr. Lee has already answered my question, so it's more to the other panelists. I had a brief discussion with her before this panel, and I promised I would ask a relevant question. So my question is, we heard that LDCs have to navigate this world of environmental impacts, especially from climate change, and at the same time they have to deal with this whole fragmentation of policies that we've been hearing about this whole week, like CBAM, like the Inflation Reduction Act, other policies. So how do the panelists in a kind of strategic way suggest that LDCs can collaborate? Which kind of platforms can they use to address those issues together? Because they probably need to have associations like the Pacific Island Forum, which is a great initiative. So how can we also stimulate and facilitate collaboration and participation of LDCs, which we need so much at the multilateral and plurilateral level to navigate this world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Please.
Thank you very much. This session has been really very interesting. All the speakers, congratulations to you. I have a few questions, but I'll just limit myself to one or two. To Dr. Lee, you have brought out the story of Gambia regarding used clothes and all, so which is very good, and we know that because of the circularity of the economy, so this is one of the ways. But in the name of circular economy, so we also hear complaints regarding dumping of used clothes from the European or Western countries. So what is your experience? Is the Gambian case it's different, and how they have been different, and which means that it is possible. So what is the reason? The other issues, I have questions to Dr. Ratnakar also, and I'm really fascinated by Dr. Giri's presentation and the work you are doing. So, and the pricing, the last point, I'll just connect to Ratnakar also, that value-based pricing and competitive pricing. So I don't know what is value-based pricing, but competitive prices is important to survive in the market. And if you don't have skills or scale, then it is very difficult. So what is the market size? And also the cost of production, all these are related, how you are surviving and how you are planning to scale up. That's one thing, my question. But regarding this, garments, textile, because I come from Bangladesh, so there is this story of, textile. And nowadays, since we are emphasizing the whole, buyers and brands are asking for greening the whole value chain, and particularly after this COP26, all countries, particularly the advanced countries, have made commitments by the middle of the century. So they have to clean up, the whole value chain itself. But when it is imposed to the list LDCs, then it is a problem because, it requires so much of investment. So I know from the case of Bangladesh that it is, though the larger factories can internalize the cost investment, but for the small and medium enterprises, it is beyond their means. As a result, there is a fear of those farms being evicted because the larger ones will have to then maybe expand and take over because of the lack of finance and technology. So this is one query, that how we can increase support. Finance is a huge issue. How the EIF does EIF have any plans? And finance, as Dr. Ratnakar mentioned, that it has to be from various sources, not only, the public sector cannot, even the private sector, but it has to be a combination of many sources, including the brands and buyers and multilateral development banks and many others. So we have to think of blended finance. The other issue is also the harmonization. While the factories are doing, greening and, getting their certification, but there are differences in the certificate. What is green? There is this common and very popular one is this LEED certification. But each brand and buyer has their own criteria, own standards. So harmonization of those standards is very important. I don't see that WTO has any discussion whether it has and how it can also help. So I have many other, but I will just restrict to this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for your insights and comments. I think your intervention is very valuable because you have shared some very useful ideas that will be noted by everyone. I think you have few questions within that, but most of the intervention is noted. So I will ask the panelists just to take a quick minute because we are running out of time. And before we do that, is there any other questions? I see the Gambia have a question. Please proceed. Yeah.
Thank you very much, moderator. Thank you, panelists, for your insightful points highlighted here. For Dr. Adria, I want to know, is there any specific funding mechanism that is in place and accessible to member states in the implementation of the 2022-2025 trade strategy for the Pacifics? For Dr. Ratnakar and Dr. Lee, thank you so much for your commendations for the Gambia in the work that we are doing. In fact, the Gambia, to strengthen national coordination, has been informed by our regional engagements since the time of the ECOWAS trade liberalization scheme negotiations, which call for strengthening national coordination in terms of trade issues. And of course, this got expanded when the DTIS, the Trade Diagnostic Study of 2007, was also launched. So, and we'll continue in that line as a country because, like you have highlighted, it has given us so much benefits. For environment and trade work, since the inception of EIF, we have done so much. On the Tier 1 and Tier 2, you can remember the work that has been done with the Kasu farmers, the cargo complex, and of course the aflatoxin mitigation. All those are definitely related to trade and environment because it was able to ensure quality assurance, and the work that we have done with the private sector, the fishing industries, in terms of ensuring quality assurance in their work, and of course market access and post-harvest losses, were all managed under those projects. And of course for the chili sauce, what we want is to boost production, value addition, quality assurance, and of course market access through the elimination of stringent market access measures. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other? Any other question? I don't. Right there. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for this inspiring presentation. It was really good, and I think I can vouch for everybody that we could go on listening to you all for hours together. Very inspiring. My question basically is very specific and related to what Dr. Lee mentioned about the plastic and the trade, which really bothers me because whenever I unpack anything, I'm like, is this packaging really required? And I always think like, okay, I am maybe thinking from the other side as a consumer. What about the producer? Does the producer really think about it? From the producer's side, I guess it's more like, okay, he's more concerned about the product itself and not the packaging. My question specifically is, are there any projects that we can learn from, like that EIF has supported on that front? Like, what can the producers do about the plastic and what can we consumers do about that in a very, very practical way? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will stop the questions there, and if the panelists can be very quickly in a minute to share the different questions asked, because we have people waiting outside. So you can be very quick. Thank you.
Should we start first?
We'll start from there and we walk.
Okay, I can start first, and in 1 minute I try to provide 3 answers. The first one on the thinking strategically on the environment, the World Economic Forum. As I said at the beginning, we don't have environment as a priority of our Aid for Trade Strategy 2020-2025, and this is a little bit like in the WTO. You don't have nothing, so it's an opportunity to go to do some strategic thinking. In fact, I have a paper just with me, which is on trade and environment, which we will propose to our ministers for approval in October at their meeting, and that calls for a regional approach to trade and environment, both defensive and offensive. And this will then eventually, our proposal is to lead to an initial workshop, regional workshop in 2024, made by trade and environment officials to start elaborating, and academics to start elaborating this common position, and then eventually will filter in the next iteration of our Aid for Trade strategy from 2026 on. On the question from Bangladesh, on the issue that I suppose that every producer uses his own standards, I think quality infrastructure really is a response to that, because obviously through the system of quality infrastructure is possible to harmonize. I mean, this is the very objective of quality infrastructure, is to harmonize standards. I think you were referring to producer standards. So in that case, I suppose the more you are as part of, for example, in our regional grouping, and the more is possible to agree on common standards that then can be branded uniquely as the unique standard of your region or of your producers.
Thank you, Gioco. Thank you so much. We are being pressured to close. Yeah. So just half a minute quickly.
Three questions, my three responses. Number one, LDC and all of WTO members. You asked me within the WTO context, so I will say WTO. Be proactive, be specific, and be radical, because this is an issue that we are dealing with. It is something that needs to go beyond the normal box. Thank you.
Thank you. Radhika?
Thank you very much. So in relation to the value-based pricing, I think, Dr. Giri will provide the response. But then we have an initiative with Fair Trade, and we are working in Timor-Leste and Ethiopia. But, we've also realized the fact that if there is a value-based pricing and there's a credible sort of organization which is handling it, there are market people out there who are ready to pay a higher price, a premium price for those products. So that is the kind of niche market that needs to be tapped into. In relation to plastic, very good question. We are actually supporting the e-waste management in Rwanda. We can discuss later how we are supporting, and that also involves recycling of plastic. Thank you.
Joy, thank you.
Thank you. So on the question, thank you, on the value-based pricing, for a country like Bhutan, I think that's the only way to go, because we can't produce in mass, in volume. So as I mentioned earlier, we focus on low-volume, high-quality products, environmentally friendly, environmentally sustainably processed, and also organic products, and we focus quite a lot on branding. And we've been fortunate actually to have partnership with hotels like Six Senses Bhutan, where we are reaching out to the international clients, high-end clients. Also, Tribal Trust Foundation, a foundation based in U.S. that supports indigenous communities around the world, and they visit Bhutan, and they provide also market linkages for enterprises such as Mountain Crafts. So we have been focusing high-end niche market, but it's a struggle. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to warmly thank all our speakers for joining us today and sharing their very valuable insights. We have indeed demonstrated that environmental sustainability is a pressing concern for the LDCs, and the importance of mainstreaming this priority into national and regional policy frameworks. At the same time, the centrality of aid for trade has come out clearly in supporting the LDCs to address critical vulnerabilities and to ensure resilience in the face of the urgency of the climate crisis. The role of the multilateral trading system also emerged, and the importance of having LDC voices in the multilateral and plurilateral conversations. Finally, and certainly not the least, the importance of sustainable business practices has also emerged. We have clearly seen that supporting enterprises to be profitable in the LDCs could be done alongside ensuring that there are no negative impacts on the environment and indigenous cultures. Once again, I would like to express our immense gratitude to our panelists for graciously sharing these very valuable insights, and to you for your patience and your active engagements on this important topic, which seems that if we were not pressured from outside, we have energy to move forward and engage in more appropriate discussions. Once again, I wish you all a very productive end of the public forum and a very, very restful weekend to enjoy this wonderful country called Switzerland and Geneva. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.